So a quick overview on what I'm going to go through. So we saw a couple of videos on how community environments are for the children. And we also saw a sample of a home environment for the child, where the child was helped into different stages of independence and a lot of collaboration with the child that the parents were doing. And the the two videos also touched upon a little bit about the Montessori tenets that they are built upon, and we will be reinforcing some of those before we go on to what how Cascade can help you as well. So yeah, that's the presentation entirely about. So a quick peep into infancy. Yeah. Okay. So the journey to the world of the child. So if you see, right, it begins right at conception, right? So at the time of conception, the relationship between the mother and the father is something that plays a huge role in the way the child is conceived also. So here it says the acceptance or rejection of pregnancy influences the product of conception, that is the baby. And it also speaks about the importance of the paternal figure giving affection and protection. So at this stage, it is about the affection and protection of the mother. And this is right before, the child is conceived. So these are basically images from the prenatal timeline of the baby's development in the womb. So the acceptance is something that we saw in the first video, which one of the trainers spoke about. So that is something that is very, very important, because the complete acceptance that we show to our child right from conception, whether we want the child, that is something that plays a huge factor in the emotional growth of the child. The child will be able to, understand how the parents' attitude is towards them, and that is something that we need to be really aware of. What our attitude is with regard to this child that is coming up. So right from the time of conception, you see that the bottom gray line, I'm not sure if the writings are visible, so I'll just tell you what the lines below, that's what I wanted to focus on in the second image. So it talks about the memory right from conception. The memory is something that keeps on building. It keeps on building because the way the child's conception is taken by the body of the mother and the emotions of the mother and the father, both of which play an important role, because the emotions of the father also indirectly affect that of the mother. So right from that, all that is being recorded in the memory of the embryo that is being formed. So that is something that plays a significant role. Then we also have the other lines. It is about the stimulation, the various stimulations. The blue lines talk about, the blue or the purple lines talk about the movement stimulations that are available in the environment. How the movement of the mouth of the embryo, the movement with regard to the environmental factors within the womb, and the movement of the skin of the mother. So all that is something that starts uh, starts influencing the child's growth within the womb. So these are some things that are there. So we've always heard from doctors that the first few months until third or fourth month is very, very crucial. Why is that? This is because of these factors. I mean, the movement of the mother, the movement of the uh, mother during the pregnancy time, during those weeks, is something that is very, very crucial. And we also see those red lines. Those are the language stimulations that can be offered by the environment. There is music, there is environmental sounds, the mother's heartbeat, the mother's voice, which is the first two of the red ones. So those are also something child starts hearing from the beginning.
1 minute. I think somebody's mic is not muted. Somebody's mic is not muted. Can you please mute your mic? Thank you.
Thank you. So the various voices that are heard by the child in the womb, that's what the red lines talk about. So these are around the 10th week, 10th to 12th week. Till the 12th week is what all these lines that are that I'm talking about begin. That's when the stimulations, and that's when all those are being, judged in judged or perceived in little quantities. It's not that the child can get it completely, but these start affecting the child in the womb, or start influencing the child in the womb right from those times. So yeah. And slowly the various sensory organs, the taste, the vision, all those also start influencing the child. So usually it's around the uh, 16th week is when the taste buds begin. So we find the mothers having different kinds of craving. And vision, by vision we mean the sensitivity to light, so where the mother is during that time. So that is something that, again, that is something that influences how the child's vision and the capacity to see. So all that also is something that influences the child's growth in the womb, right? Then at the time of birth, so this is when the child is completely ready and he comes out. And it is always something that during our training that was emphasized on, that the child is the one who decides when he is ready to come out. He's like the traveler who is ready to pack his bags and leave, and he is deciding that time. And naturally that is very much possible, but then the way we modify that, the way we influence as adults, that also has played a significant role in the past decade and decade or two mostly. And even before that, when from the time when the advancements in the medical field happened. And once the birth has happened, the the first 2 months is very very significant, and that is depicted by the uh, image that is drawn there, with the mother and father providing the loving care for the child during that symbiotic period. So this is the time when the child builds the trust on the world, and this is something that is crucial for him, because the trust on the world is what will help him to start trusting himself. So this time of the symbiotic period is very very crucial, right? So that is the journey of the child to the world. So this child coming to the world, I spoke about him being a traveler. So this image was provided by one of the participants, actually. I think that's what Vidya ma'am was saying, the one on the right. So I'll just give a minute for you to read through all the questions. Just think of what a migrant traveler would think of and what the child thinks of. Look at the questions. Do they ring a bell? What all babies really want to know is what exactly all of us want to know, right? So the questions: am I welcome? Am I wanted? Am I seen, felt, and heard? Do I belong? Am I safe and protected? Am I lovable? Do I matter in this world? Aren't these the questions that goes through a migrant who's forced to go to a new country where he doesn't know the language of that country? Isn't that very similar? It is a striking similarity that we can relate to, because this child, he has not got any of the characteristics that the adult is living with, and he is wondering as to what are the things that I am going to do outside in the world. And that is pretty much what the same predicament that the migrant also has at a new country. And this was this was a striking realization for me as well. So yeah. Moving on. Uh, so we spoke a little bit about what the child goes through over the first few months, the kinds of stimulation, the kinds of influences that the child has in the womb. Now, looking at the physical embryo, the child himself, you see that the zygote that is formed, it is actually a single cell that begins with, and slowly it divides itself further and further, forming several key organs: the lungs for breathing, the heart for the circulation, the brain for the control system, the kidney for the excretory system, and finally the spleen for the digestive system. So all these major organs that the child develops during the first few weeks, especially during the conception, this is basically until say the 16th or the 16th to 20th weeks, when all the major organs are formed. They're, those are being built up at that time, but the finishing of that takes the rest of the conception period. So the building up of these organs is being considered very crucial. Like we already said, this particular period during the conception is considered really crucial even by the medical community, and they caution the mother as to why it is important and what it is doing to the child, right? So we know a lot about this. Now, a child that is coming out, yes, physically he is ready, physically he is formed, not completely in the sense like an adult, but at least he is equipped himself to become an adult. He knows, I mean, he is ready with regard to the iron supplies, with regard to the stimulation that can be offered by the environment and how he can develop within that. So that is something that the uh, child is equipped with during the period of conception. But then what about the psychological aspect of the child? What is happening to that? We saw that there are certain simulations that are possible during the conception period with regard to music, with regard to the sounds, with regard to the mental state of the mother, right? So all those stimulations, what do they lead to? What does the child need in the later stages? We spoke about the physical needs here, the various organs which will be functioning in the real world, but what are the psychological needs of the child? How is he preparing that? That is something that we'll be focusing on a lot. So one of the first things that we talk about is the language. And so language is one of the psychological organs, we can say. So there are 5 such organs that I'll be going through. So I'll tell you as and when I go through. Now, language is a very, very important tool for the child. And we speak about 4 major requirements for the spoken language of the child to work. These 4 important things are the auditory apparatus, a really good functioning auditory apparatus. The child should be able to hear the voices in the environment. That is something that is very, very important. The child should be having a very good vocal apparatus. The vocal apparatus is what enables the child to speak eventually. So this is another thing that is very important. Both of these are biological, and these are some things that are developed right from conception. These are biological factors. But then what are the psychological factors? The child should have a very rich language environment, and he should also have the desire to speak. So what do we mean by this rich language environment? So that is what this is all about. So back and forth communication. This is something that is very, very crucial right from the 12th day. That's when they say that the child can really focus on the voices of the people around. And that that time, the parents have to give, it's like talking to an adult. It's like pausing when we are having a conversation. We would ask a question or we would say something and wait how the other person is reacting, right? So this is something that we naturally do when the other person is talking. But if the other person is not talking, do we actually take care to do that? Do we actually take care to give a pause for the child to at least express with body language as to what he has understood? So this is something that is needed right from the beginning. And depending upon the capability of the child, whether he is cooing, whether he is babbling, whether he is speaking, having conversations with babbling, or whether he's saying words, or even if he's saying sentences. In any such situation, are we waiting the right amount of time for the child to listen, process what we are saying? That is very important. The same way, when we there is a lot of scope for speaking of language for the adults. We have so much interaction with the child. There is so much that we do for the child. We feed the child. We change the child. We change the child the nappies. We help him to clear his urine or the feces that he passes. We give him a bath. So there are a lot of interactions, a lot of transactions that happen between the child and the parents or the adults around. So during all those times, it is very, very crucial to label. Remember the video again when Edison was given the bath. I'm going to wash your ears. Now let's move on to your elbows. So she was actually labeling those parts. She was labeling what she was doing. And all these can be done right from the first bath that we give for the child. So like that, every transaction that we do with the child is scope for language. Then the opportunities to express. So this is again as part of the back and forth communication that we have. But once the child starts saying words, he needs the freedom to actually be heard. And that is something that is very, very important. So if the child has something, and if we are busy, yes, we are busy, but respectfully telling him that, can you wait for a moment before I finish this, before I can hear you? So that kind of a respect to the child's thoughts, so that we can listen to what he has to say. That is very important. And he also has a freedom to talk to others in the environment. So when a visitor comes to the home, how are we approaching that? Are we introducing that visitor to the child? We are all introducing the child to the visitor, that we do. But what about the reverse? And when the visitor is talking, letting them to interact with the child with the freedom to listen as well. So that is something that is crucial. And even in the first video and in the second video, there were a lot of areas, a lot of moments where the adult was very, very respectful. Like you can see that, especially when the child was trying to take the suitcase out of the cubby. So she saw that the child had forgotten his backpack. So she did indicate it with regard to, saying that, do you want to take your backpack? She left it at that. But then later on, when the child saw the other child taking his backpack, he realized that he had forgotten his, and he went for it. So giving the time and space for the child to really process what is missing, what is it that he has forgotten. So that time and space is something that's very, very important. And the consistency in communication. So this is with regard to uh, I mean, there was a question about what if we are living in apartments and we can't give the freedom that that was possible in olden days. So one thing that we need to be clear about is what the child can access and what he can't. I'll be coming to that part. But with regard to the consistency in communication, what it means is, if we are sure that certain things are not accessible for the child, we need to communicate it firmly, but at the same time respectfully to the child. So, and whenever the child wants to access it, however the mental situation we are in, whatever the daily happenings that happen around us, whatever that is, we are still maintaining that consistency with regard to, that particular area is not accessible. Just because we are hard pressed, we are stressed out, just because we have gone to the level where we are not in a position to tackle that time, if we give in to something, something that is not accessible initially to the child, if that consistency is broken, then the child knows that the limits are not firm. So automatically he will push it, right? So these are certain tenets that we need to look out for with regard to language. Then movement. Movement is another important organ that the child acquires during the first few years. So there are two major kinds of movement: the gross motor movement and the fine motor movement. So with gross motor, we've seen flipping, creeping, crawling, pulling up, walking. All those things are standing and walking. All those things are known to us. But then after that, what? Running, climbing, pulling, pushing, brachiation, where the child stretches his body to the maximum, carrying, jumping, and many more. All those are also still part of the gross motor movement. Again, with the fine motor movement, the various things that the child develops during the first few months actually. The grasps, the various ways in which he handles things. It takes actually almost 6 months for the child to use his thumb in opposition, if you really notice. And the various grips that he has, holding first with his outside of the palm, and then slowly moving on to the center of the palm, and then using his fine pincer grips. So how that works. Then the threading, once the grip is there, how the child slots things through, uh, vertical dowels or through thread, whatever it is. So the threading of the things through various items, then the sliding movement of the hand, the rotating movement of the hand, and then even finer movements that the child can do. So these are all acquisitions during the first 3 years that the child goes through. And how does a child usually acquire any movement? So this is a cycle that keeps on happening during the first 6 years also. As in, the first 3 years is very crucial because that's when majority of the development part happens. And during the latter half, that is from 3 to 6 years, is when a lot of refinement happens. So every movement, if you see, be it walking, be it crawling, be it creeping, whatever be it, the first step is a development where the child, attempts to make that particular movement. And he keeps attempting, he keeps attempting on and on and on. And the more he attempts it, the more he refines that particular movement. And even with the refinement, he starts trying out different things. Once the child starts crawling, you can see him going under, a chair that has a space below and trying to overcome the flat footrests that are there, as in the flat rests of the particular chair or table, trying to go over it, over one, first the hands and then the legs, and how he overcomes all those. So those are all little refinements that he has over the crawling. And same way with the pulling up. First he tries to pull up on the parents, then he pulls up on different objects in the environment. He might realize that some objects are good for pulling up, some objects are not. So he'll start going towards things that he can surely pull up against. And then once he's acquired the various things, he starts using it for further complicated, challenging development, the challenging movements that he can develop. So this cycle keeps going on and on and on during the first 3 years. So this is something that we can constantly observe in the child, the way he is moving on from one moment to the other. So what we can do as parents, how we can aid the child. So right at the beginning, say even from 3-4 weeks, the tummy time is something that is very, very important with regard to the movement, because the child's hand, forearms, and the shoulders need the strength to actually pull himself up to the crawling position. And this is something that he gets only if he is on the prone position or the tummy position, on his tummy. So that is the time when he can actually slowly get a different view of the world and at the same time slowly push himself up as well. So this is even before flipping that I'm talking about. Now, this might sound in contradictory to the next statement, where the child is never placed or supported in a position that he or she cannot get to him by him or herself. So we say that, the child's natural position is supine. So the prone position is something that is not natural. But then, can the child actually get into the supine position by himself unless we lay him there? That's not possible, right? So it is again another simple way of laying the child that we are seeing. So be it supine, be it on his back, or be it on his tummy, it needs the help of the adult until the child starts flipping over. So that is something that is very crucial. But the tummy time has to be very limited, because the child uh, the head of the child is not yet fixed, and gravity plays its part when he is on the tummy time. His head will fall forward. So it needs to be restricted. It can't be, at the beginning, it can be only for 10-15 seconds. And slowly it can be increased up to 1 minute till the child is, comfortable with it. And once he's comfortable and his head is also fixed, he will actually enjoy that much more. So this is something that is crucial for his development of the upper body's strength. And that is very, very important for the movement. And then with regard to the freedom to movement itself. So this was a question that actually came up. How can we give the freedom when we are living in apartments where there are a lot of things, a lot of material which the child cannot access? So we need to really think about what we have in the home environment. So baby proofing is something that is not only with regard to doors or cupboards that can be opened or closed, or plug points. It is also with regard to the accessibility of the child. So what is really accessible to this moving child is something that we really have to think through, because we need to be comfortable with the child handling anything within his access. Only then you can actually be comfortable giving that freedom to move. So if that is not there, then it is something that the child will miss out on. And freedom of movement is very, very important even for language, because it is known that the movement is what develops various neurons in the brain, which also help in language development. So this is something that is very, very crucial. And the freedom is something that is non-negotiable. Now, how adults can provide that freedom is something that we can think of. So that is the main focus of health that we can offer. So you can think of along with us as to what are the things that can be rearranged in the house. I'm not saying that all the materials need to go out of the house, but it needs to be rearranged in such a way that depending upon the movement of the child, what can be in access of the child and what cannot be in access of the child is something that we need to be clear about. Like, if the washing machine is in access to the child, the points or the control switches of the same is slightly inaccessible. So it is actually all right for the washing machine to be there wherever it is, because all the child will probably do is go up and try to pull up against the washing machine. That's all. So this is something that we can actually let happen. But if the door is a side door, and if the child has mastered the idea of opening and closing the door, then it becomes an issue, right? So you need to be careful when the machine is on, but other times it should be fine, right? So like that, there'll be different areas or different ways in which we'll have to think of how we can allow this freedom to move, freedom of movement. And the clothing plays an important role right from the beginning again, because the child needs the appropriate clothing for him to crawl or flip over. And that is something that is, clothing is something that can be cumbersome for the child when he is moving. And even when he is walking, making sure that he doesn't wear anything loose, especially a child who's in the cusp of walking and trying to, master that. So it is very, very important that he's not worn something loose, or if it's a girl child, skirts can be very cumbersome. So those kind of things we need to be aware of. And those kind of clothing is something that we must avoid for the child. And the challenges that we introduce based on observation. So this is mainly for the toddlers. Once they've acquired a fair bit of movement, and even for the very young child who can sit, who can move around, what kind of activities or what kind of aids can be provided, what kind of movements can be introduced for the child. We saw that need in the nido where there was something, there was a rubber there was a hand globe, I think, which the adult was trying to show how to flip it. So there's a rubber stopper which uh, fixes the globe to the ground, and it just she just tried to push the globe towards the child. It's actually more of a sliding movement of the hand, which makes the globe actually move backward and forward, right? So why is that important? The different kinds of movement, the challenges that we need later on, like what you're talking about with regard to eating, with regard to food preparation, whatever that the child is going through, all those depend upon these early movements, how much they've been mastered. So work for the hand is something that can start right when the child is able to sit by himself. So the moment he is able to sit by himself, what are the different kinds of work that he can do? The work, when I say work, it means what he can do with his hand, how he can engage his hand with regard to pulling a rubber stopped globe, or it could be with regard to hiding a little cube inside a box. It could be anything of that sort. So it could also be threading as the child's grip develops further. So depending upon what the child, how the child's grasp is, the different challenges can be introduced for the child over the first year itself. And later on, what kind of practical life activities that will help him to further refine his movement. Those kind of activities need to be thought of. So these are the challenges that we need to keep on adding while the child has mastered a particular movement. So these are some aspects that we can help, we can think about while aiding the movement of the child. Then emotion, expressing emotion is something which is very very crucial for the child, and he is actually very good at it from right from the beginning. He's actually very adept in reading the emotions of the parents, because imagine, like I said, when a migrant goes to a new country, the body language is all he has to perceive how he is received by that particular nation. So it's very similar. The child also reads the body language of the adults around. But what the adults also need to be aware of is the child also has his own temperament, his approach to new things, his his mood, his distractibility quotient, like what are the things that distract him. All those are very very crucial. Like if an adult is very open to trying out different things, the adult's temperament might be such that. But for the child, he might be someone who's really careful before trying out. And for such a child, it might take a lot more time for him to try out something new. But it doesn't mean that you can't introduce anything new. We have to be persistent about it. It needs a lot more persistence from our side than from the child side. So I saw with regard to one child, because as part of the course we had to observe babies, and this particular child was cruising very smoothly. Okay, she was cruising very fine, and she was cruising along this long sofa, and there were a lot of guests that day at home, and there was a particular guest who was staying 5 feet away. Okay, so she would go the entire length of the sofa, come back, and right at the edge of the sofa, she would weigh her options. She was literally weighing whether she can take the steps towards that particular adult. She wanted to try. She was almost ready to try, but she was being very hesitant. She actually went cruising along the sofa for almost 3-4 times before she actually went or attempted to go towards the adult. She took 2 steps and she fell down. Yes, she dropped down. But the amount of time she took to actually make that movement was very very crucial. Because if it had been seen by some of the parents or someone else, and if they were of the temperament where they wanted her to go on and try, there was nothing wrong, that they were there for support. If that was the kind of push that they had given, the child might actually have resisted doing it. Because this is something, walking is something that the child has to do on his own accord. And when he is given the time to do it, it is much more natural. It is much more, he is much more open to accepting his mistakes. So that is something that will be much more useful for the child than if the adult is around and trying to support and trying to be there if he falls. So that is something that we don't need to do, right? So that is something we can be aware if we know the temperament, if we see the patterns in which the child takes up to different things. That is something that is very crucial. With regard to attitudes, we spoke about acceptance already, and the opposite of that is rejection. So that there are various forms of it, which is quite a topic to go on a separate time. So I'm not going to go too deep into it right now. But I do want to touch upon the developmental crisis. So this is something that Dr. Silvana Montanaro, who you saw in the first video, she talks about. She talks about birth, which is around right at the time when the child is born, and objectivation, which you usually see around 7 to 9 months, and self-affirmation, which is around 1.5 to say 2.5 years. It could happen anytime. So these are 3 areas or 3 times during the child's life where he goes through a crisis. So birth is obviously a separation. It is a separation from the mother's body, and he was dependent on someone for so long, and suddenly he's come out into the new world where he has to breathe by himself, he has to feed by himself, he has to he's going to experience new sensations as to passing or excreting his waste. And there are different sensations that the child goes through, different experiences right from the womb, and how he actually addresses that, what kind of feelings or what kind of emotions that he goes through during this time is very important. I told you, like, the symbiotic period is when he develops a trust in the world. So right after birth, those 2 months are very, very crucial for the child to build that trust. And once he's built that trust, that's when he trusts himself. So how to build that trust? So during those 2 months, we say that the mother and the child feed off each other. Not only the actual feeding, it is also the emotional feeding, because even the mother goes through postpartum pangs or postpartum depression, which she feels that a part of her body is actually separated, and she feels a loss which she cannot explain unless the child is along with her. She has to feel that the child is not gone far away from her. So the privacy of the mother and the child is very, very crucial during those first 2 months. And that is something that the father and the adults around will have to support and uh, facilitate. That is very crucial. Then, with regard to stranger danger, where the child, once he is starting to move really fast, he goes out of sight of the caregivers or the mother or the parents or whoever it is. And suddenly he sees that he's all alone. And this is something that he never has experienced before. So this is a different kind of separation that the child is able to achieve. And once he's able to achieve that, what happens is he's emotionally surely afraid, because this is the first time he's doing it. So how we approach that? By actually not going to the child and carrying him when he is crying, but actually telling him that you went on your own. So make sure that, being there for him, that telling him that I'm right here. I'm right over here. You crawled away. Come back to mama. Come back to papa. So just showing your face to him and making sure that he makes the effort to come back to us. So that is the kind of emotion that will help him to accept this separation, that he can actually go somewhere, he can move away, and he can come back to us. That is very much possible. And this is seen especially when new people come to the house, because he suddenly sees that, there is someone new, and he feels, when he's having this emotion of, being scared when he is alone, when a different kind of an adult comes into the environment, that is also a different environment that he is in. So he wouldn't want to spend that time with the adult at that particular time. So he wouldn't willingly go to the adult, even if it is a very well known person. He might want to cling on to the parent for some time before, once he is acclimatized to the new adult, he would actually go happily. So we need to give that time and space for him. And then finally, self-affirmation is where, the child starts saying, no, I don't want to do this. Or, he starts using the word I if he is using in English. Or it could be nan, yennoda, abdindra mari, something related to, or maybe using his own name. That is also possible. Uh, and he can actually refer to himself through his name. So the reference to the self, that is what we mean here. And he understands that his choices count. He understands that he can actually take decisions, and this is the time when he starts saying no to some things just because it is being told by someone else. So at that particular time, the choices make a very, very important tool for him to express himself emotionally, and to make sure that his choices are being considered, to make sure that his decisions are being taken into account. So how to provide that? So that is something that is very, very crucial during that time. So these are all with regard to the emotional development of the child. Then, with regard to the will, we saw, the last two parts, you will see a lot of repetition, so I'll be going through it a little faster. So freedom with limits, we saw how with regard to movement, the child is free to move, but the accessibility is something that acts as limits. We are clear about what the child can access and what we cannot. We are consistent about it. So those limits need to be really clear. Then opportunities to make choices. So even right at birth, Dr. Montanaro tells in a book, Understanding the Human Beings, that right at birth, the child needs to be taken close to the breast of the mother, but he has to make the effort to reach out and actually start feeding. The accessibility should be what is provided, but the choice of feeding should be still of the child. And that is something that she was very clear. And loud and clear about it in her book. So these choices are there right through the life during the first 3 years. And like I said in the self-affirmation time, the choices need to be limited. They need to be only 2 or 3. It cannot be like 5, 10 choices for the child to choose from. He'll be overwhelmed. It needs to be very, very limited. And it should also be within the capability. You said, I mean, Judy Orion, she was talking about, uh, you know, I make judgments as to what the child can do and can't do, right? So we need to make that judgment for the child, yes, but within the judgment we can give choices, like, would you like to work with the globe which moves, or would you like to work with the cube which goes in and out of the box? So the choice of two activities is very, very important during that period of self-affirmation, where the child's self-esteem grows with every decision that he takes. So he has to be led to make decisions, but within the limits. And aiding of the functional independence, again, right from birth. So this is in the order in which we can actually take the child towards independence: sleeping, eating, toileting. So right from birth, the child has to be, you know, led to sleep by himself, and he must choose the time when he is going to sleep. And this can be provided. You saw the low bed that Edison had. He actually was able to, just climb onto the bed and sleep, and climb out of the bed when he's awake. So that is something that is very useful. And eating, with regard to weaning away, especially, right? You saw the table where, it was a beautiful tablecloth with the embroidered uh, positions for the plates and everything. So the making that as a celebration of sorts, where the child is made to feel special when he is actually ready to eat by himself. That goes a huge way in helping him to wean off the mother also. And toileting is something right from the beginning where the parents can help in different ways. Each of this again is a huge topic which will go for quite some time. So I'm going to stop myself there and I'll move on to the next part. But these are things that we can talk about. These are things that we can help you with, right? Then, with regard to the intellect, so all this freedom within the limits that we talked about, the choices, all those give a plethora of experience that is possible for the child. And the more the experiences, the more he is going to build up his intellect. The more he is going to interact with the environment, he's going to build up his intellect. And remember, this child is born with an absorbent mind. So this is Dr. Montessori's idea of the absorbent mind, where she talks about us, the mind acting like a sponge. He is able to absorb everything from the adults around him. He is able to imitate. He is able to take in the language, the movements of whatever that the adult does, and he is able to take it in completely without discriminating what is good, what is bad. So there's no point explaining to this very young child that this is something that you cannot do because this is not good for so and so. This is not the way we do it. No, all that reasoning doesn't work now. He has seen someone do it. He's seen someone do it, and he's taken in the movement and the language exactly with all its detail. Like, the film and the analog camera. He's taken it everything. And it takes quite some time for him to, erase it as well, because it does stay in his permanent memory. So the first few years are very, very, very crucial with regard to how the adults interact, how the adults move around in the environment. All that matters. And order in the environment is something that is very, very crucial for the child to build his intellect. So order is with regard to the routine that we follow, with regard to the things that we keep in the environment, with regard to the speech that we have, the consistency in the speech. There is also order with regard to how things are placed, how they are used, the functional order, that also matters. So there are different kinds of order that again helps the child to, orientate and classify the things that he has encountered in the environment within his mind. And that is very, very crucial. And the various activities, we spoke about a lot of activities. We saw a lot of activities that Edison could do and the various children could do. So those are all activities. So there was a question about, we didn't see the children play. So this child of 0 to 3 is actually working on constructing himself. These 5 organs that we are talking about: language, movement, will, emotion, intellect, These are the things that he is building over the first 2 to 3 years. These are something that he is crystallizing. These are the psychological organs that he is building. And for this, he needs to work. It's actually work for him. We consider it as play, but these are actually work. The work, why we call it work? Because he involves his complete body with regard to the hands, with regard to the body, with regard to the language. He involves himself completely. So these are all important work for the child to do. And we have termed the coin, we've coined the term play, right? And we call it play when the child, throws around things or does things with, toys. Toys are again something that is introduced by the adults. But have you seen how the child works with the toys? He tries to, replicate real life situations. He might have a kitchen set and he might actually try to cook. But if real things are given to him, imagine the amount of self-esteem that the child can actually build right at the very young age. That is very, very important for the child. And that is very, very crucial. So now these 5 organs we saw was very, very important. So the last part of the presentation goes into how we can support, how Cascade can support all this along with the parents for you to help the child build these organs, psychological organs, for him to become a functional, independent individual. So the home environment setup support, we saw how, the idea might seem very Western, how to set up the home environment in support of the child. It is possible in whatever environment we are in. It is possible, but we need to put our mind time to it. That is very, very important, and that is where we can help. So setting up of a child-friendly home environment, whatever be the environment, whatever be the limitations that we have, within those limitations we can still work as to what is possible, what is, what are the things that can work. There might be a limited budget from the parent side, that is also possible. But then within that limited budget, how to make things, such that the child can still have at least a fair amount of freedom. And once the child is given that environment, how to engage with the child during that time, that is the human environment. While the physical environment is taken care, the human environment is how, as parents, we can interact with the child, how we need to prepare when the child is going out with the parents somewhere, or how when a visitor comes in, how the child must be prepared. Then with regard to the developmental aids, I know you saw a lot of materials in the environment, and these are materials that are, yes, that are being manufactured, but there are a lot of things that we can hand make, and how to do that. So those can be given through workshops, and it could be done using even the homemade items that we have. This is very much possible. So how we are going to do that? The workshops could be helpful to make those materials based on home without actually, spending a lot on that. It's actually spending more time towards it rather than the money or the immediately trying to get things that can be avoided. So all this sharing of knowledge and resources, this is something that we can offer as a package. Home environment support. This is open for membership. And the next part is the study circles and events. So these are sessions like we are having right now, right? So these are book readings that could be related to Montessori, that could be parenting related. And we also have tools and techniques that help in setting up and maintaining the environment. We talked about order in the environment. So how to bring about that order? There are certain tools and techniques. We spoke about, consistency in speech even when we are stressed out. What are the different tools and techniques that help us, overcome that stress and help us to be aware of how we are reacting, and then slowly change towards what needs to be done for the child. So these are very, very crucial aspects of childcare that we need to understand. So these are all sessions that can be offered. These all could be offered through sessions by us in Cascade, at Cascade. And these are again in a package for study circle and events. So this is again open for membership. Then finally, we are coming up with our own toddler environment, which will serve the needs of the child who is beginning to walk stably. So this is right from the child, right from the age around 1.5 that's when these children can uh, be in part of this environment. So there are different aspects that we saw: the entrance, then we saw this is the psychomotor development with regard to the materials that help in his gross motor and fine motor skills. Then the language material. You see that some of the shelves are empty because we are still working on the environment, so he'll be open for admissions by October, right? So the language area where you can see a reading corner where there is a stand for the books, then a small cozy corner where the children can sit and read books, and we also have tables and chairs where the children can work on different language materials. Then we also have a community table. You see that the tabletop that is there. So it is again modified to what we can offer the child in an Indian context. Sitting down and eating is something that is very Indian, which is very Asian probably. So this is something that we can facilitate by setting it up in such a way. And the work around that, you see the table behind that is for the cleaning of vessels, and there is a sidebar which helps in the food prep. So that is kind of the environment that even at home it is possible, provided we give some thought to it, provided we give some time and space for that. Then the care of environment, the washing of clothes, or it could be washing tables, it could be watering plants, care of indoor and outdoor environment. Then care of person, where the child is shown, child is led to work on washing his hands. This is a material for that. And you also see at the distance to the left of the image where you will see low stools and benches for the child to sit and help himself to divest of his clothes. So all those are also facilitated, right? And this is for the gross motor movement. You see the staircase for the children to go up and down. So this is something that the children would love to do once they start walking, going up and down in a safe space for them to exercise their body completely to develop their equilibrium. Yeah, so these are the different aspects in the toddler community that we offer. So this again is open for children from 1.5 years. Once they are able to walk steadily, the language doesn't matter. It's actually only the movement that matters for this child. And yeah, so these are the things that Cascade can offer to the parents. And yeah, we are open for questions now. I'm sorry, I think I overshot by quite some time. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I just want to pick on the question of Selva, who asked whether the child was not playing. Now, the adult's understanding of play is very different from what the child is actually wanting to do. So if you see, even if we give a lot of toys, the children will gravitate towards something that the adults are using. Every time they'll move to the kitchen, they'll move to the bathroom, they will move to the dining space where adults are handling things and they want real life things. So if you see, that is actually what the child is doing and wants to do. So our whole idea of dolls, toys, and things, actually children they actually reject it. And many of the homes have bundles and bundles of toys because the adults have not got themselves filled on it, and they want to see their children play. But the children actually don't want to play with those toys. They might just handle it for some time and then just reject it. As they grow older, then they have toys which they have to use their mind. That is around by 6 years or so. They can use Lego sets, they can use board games where the others are engaged. So that is something that is very, very important for parents to know. All the stuffed dolls and toys and the trinkles and then the automatic battery moving toys, all that the children just reject. Please believe me, I have seen it with my children, 30 and 28 years old. I'm seeing it now. I will see it in the future also, because this is a time-tested truth that the children do not want, especially below 6, they really do not want anything to do with imagination, and because that is not their characteristic. and they love to handle things which adults are handling. So, which is why in our classrooms we actually give them scissors, knives, safely demonstrating to them, and they do it beautifully. If you see the video, you will see that all the objects were breakable. Every object in that which the child was using was glass or porcelain or breakable items. So we must understand that the real needs of the child needs to be understood a lot better than what we actually have known. Even for me as a parent, I did not know these things. So yeah, I just thought I'll explain. Yeah, thanks.
So yes, any questions? I'm sure there are there are a lot more questions than at the beginning as what I would assume.
Okay.
So yeah.
I'm seeing that I bought a bell cylinder rattle for my baby, 3 months old, but he doesn't show interest.
Yeah. So this is a cylindrical rattle which will probably roll, right? The person can unmute himself and probably ask.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Is it a rolling rattle?
Yeah, it's a rolling rattle.
Yeah. Okay. So this is something that is slightly too early for the child right now, because at 3 months I'm assuming he's not moving very fast, right? He's not crawling yet. So once he is able to move a little faster, when he is on his prone and trying to pull up and start crawling, that is a perfect time for him to be introduced to the cylindrical rattle. He might be introduced in this. He might be liking the sound, but it'll be very difficult for him to grasp it completely, for him to shake by himself. So a very thin rattle, with a soft sound might be very useful, like, a bamboo rattle or a silver rattle, which is very thin and which he can, using his palm or grasp, he can just hold on to it. That might be something that is very useful rather than a cylindrical rattle right now. But hold on to it. You will be using it once the child is starting to crawl, when he is, when he can actually roll it by himself and go behind it. So that'll be very useful then. Yeah.
At 3 months, the child would just be making his attempts to go on the prone. And actually, so the whole effort will be his own interest or her own interest to go on the prone and go back on supine. So that is a crisis moment for the child. And that time, rattles in the front, making the child interested to move, may not be the best thing. So that is something that we need to know. As Hari said, when the child is in the supine, you show things which the child can actually reach out and hold with his hands. That'll be good. So I see a lot of another question coming up.
Yeah. Another question is about temper tantrums. Why is she liking to break things? So, okay. I mean, children naturally, as in the true nature of the child is such that they don't want to actually break things. It is more out of frustration that she is probably throwing things or doing things that is actually causing harm to the other. First thing is, yes, this is a limit. This is a point of limit where she is, when she is about to cause damage to a particular material. You need to stop the movement first, because when the child is about to throw something, that means there is a disregard for that particular material, which means this as a limit needs to be enforced consistently, that you cannot throw things. So the moment the child raises his hand to throw, and we've seen that as a pattern, we know that he is angry, he is going to express it that way. That is when we go and we can just stop the movement by placing our hand, trying to when the child is pushing it, we just placing our hand to stop that movement. And we can take away the object and tell him that, see, we cannot hurt the material. If you have something, what you need to, at that particular moment, we need to not react to the child's reaction. The child is reacting, yes, he's trying to throw. But at the same time, what we need to do is we need to see why he is angry. What is it that is making him angry at that point? That is what we need to be really aware of. And if we are in a stressed out situation, we may not be in a position to handle it. So it is best if another adult who is available for the child, who can actually take the time to process what the child is going through, steps in at that moment. The stopping of the movement can be something that you do silently also. It could be done silently, because when we are stressed out, we lash out at the children. We tend to scream out at the children. That can be avoided. We can simply stop that and pause, take a breath, take a heavy breath, and see what is really affecting the child. Because it is not the idea of throwing the material, it is some unsatisfied urge that is not being fulfilled.
Yeah.
So what
So,
is it that is something that we need to figure out?
yeah, I'll just add on to it. See, a child who feels understood will never throw or show temper, but it's an ideal situation. Let us say that we attempt to understand the child even 20% more, just 5, 10, 15, 20% more by observing the child's movements. And as Hari said in the earlier first beginning of the presentation, pause to find out what is it that the child is trying to express. That is something that we can surely, definitely expect from a parent who is maturing as a person with a deeper understanding of children. So that's something like that. So we have another question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even at play schools, written is given more importance. Is written language is given more importance? Is it absolutely necessary for 2.5 to 3 year olds? Okay, so this is something based on Montessori's observation of children that she talks about. 2.5 to 3 is when the child is, perfecting a spoken language, and in fact, 1.5 to 2.5, he's gaining all the other parts of speech, and he starts speaking in full sentences. So some children have shown the capability to write even at 2.5, 3. I'm not denying that. There are children who are capable sometimes of doing it, but should we trust it on children? No, I wouldn't say we need to trust. But what makes them actually write at that age? What makes some children write and some children not write? It is the work of the hand. How fine the grips of the children have moved. How much experience the child has in making a mark using a brush or a crayon or whatever it is, or whatever tool that he has. It could be a clay. He has worked with the clay and try to make different objects. So the work of the hand really, really matters before we ask the child to start writing. So this is something that not a lot of thought is gone in the conventional schools or the other schools. So this is something that we need to really think about as parents, whether the child is actually ready, whether his fine movements are such that he can actually start writing. This is something that we need to consider for ourselves. If the play school goes ahead and does it and you don't have any other option, that doesn't mean you have to change the school necessarily. Just don't pressurize the child from your side. That is most important. So that is very, very crucial for the child. But at the same time, facilitate the handwork of the child. That is very, very important. So
Yes.
the more and more he does fine movements with his hand, that is very, very important. So yeah, that is my take on it.
Yeah, writing is a natural. It is not forced. So if a child is ready to write, is as equal to a child who wants to speak. So let us, for example, say a child is muffled in speech. I mean, like, is not allowed to speak. The child will anyway burst out and start talking. So the same way, a child who is wanting to write needs only the right opportunities in the environment to get her fine motor skills ready. See, like this movement of the elbow, the carpus, the wrist movement, and the fine movement, and this is the last. That is the pincer grip is really a very well-developed skill. So for that to develop, unless all these movements are enabled at home with the right implements, and the child feels drawn to those, because as a natural, he will be drawn to those materials for self-construction. So in fact, that will answer the next question also. So what is the developmental, tool? So the child actually knows what he needs for constructing himself. So in a bare environment also, he will go correctly to things that will help him to construct himself. He doesn't need toys. And if you take them to a park where there are a lot of trees, I mean, like it's a very unkempt park, which Klame. So if you say that it is not a Pakka corporation park, which is all plowed and things, so he will go and pick up twigs. He'll go and pick up stones because he knows that those points of interest are there because they need that fine motor development. He'll get drawn to it, and you will see how many hours he will spend in that park without even a single toy because the nature there provides him abundantly things which he can construct himself. So this is the reason why we say that writing should not be forced. The second point is I want to draw the attention of parents sometimes giving a pen and a paper and the child scribbling away or allowing the child to scribble on the walls. See, this is a very, I will say, I will go to the extent of saying that is the highly disrespectful of the great skill that the child is coming up with. So the child has an idea of implementer, of the tool that is going to help to implement, as well as the medium. The child already has a construct. By not providing that in the right way is when the child tends to scribble on the walls. So scribbling on the wall, scribbling of a 1-year-old or a 1.5-year-old, 2-year-old, giving a pen and just keeping them busy by allowing them to scribble. Please do not do all that. It is not, it doesn't give a child a self-constructing feel that he's building the skill towards it. So what they need to do at different points in time, one of it is writing. Writing can happen as a natural corollary, natural sequence to a series of prerequisites that have been followed. I hope I've answered.
Yeah, with regard to the other question, with regard to the developmental tool as to what is considered developmental and what is not. So what we need to look at is there are several factors or several thoughts that go into this. So when we take a particular rattle or any material, first we need to see what it can offer the child, what kind of movement or what kind of language that it can offer the child. Is it something that challenges him, or is it something that is overwhelming for him, or is it something that is too too easy for him? So we need to make that judgment call. That is very, very necessary. The other aspects also refer to the harmfulness of that particular material, whether the child has the movements to take care of the material in a foolproof way, because some materials even with the slightest of touch might break. So whether the child has that much amount of refinement in his movement to sort of success in operating that particular material is something that we need to really look at. My trainer used to talk about that very often, because the success is something that helps them build their self-esteem. The success in making the sound using the rattle, the success in pushing a certain object, all that, or grasping a certain object. You can look at the faces of the child when he or she does that movement again and again. So the success of doing a certain activity, you'll need to try out. Sometimes it has to be trial and error, especially with regard to new materials. There might be trial and error required, but also look at what are the movements that the child has already exhibited in the environment. That will give a pointer as to what the child needs next. That is a crucial point.
Yeah, another thing is that the child is self-constructing. Let us definitely believe that every movement. So there is the tenets of this age group are: the child is attempting self-discipline, the child is attempting independence, the child is getting a command over the language, and the child is wanting independence. So these kind of things where the child is trying to self-construct and prove his own growth, sometimes gets garbled with some of the distracting, extremely colorful objects which temporarily disjoint him from his growth path of what he is doing. So sometimes toys end up like that, and they don't offer the right the right movements for the child to construct himself, which he really wants. And then after some time he lose interest, or he will just keep going on into an age of, into a stage of fantasy, which all doesn't help the child in self-constructing. Then he'll feel quite lost, or he or she will feel quite lost. So These are things that we must watch, and only by observing, we will be able to actually see what is actually the child wanting or needing at that particular stage of life. So I think the next question.
So, sorry, one more thing I wanted to add with regard to the trial and error. See, again, we spoke about approach of the child. So those are factors that will also influence how long the trial can be continued. Because the temperament of the child might be such that he takes time to go towards new things. For such a child, something when new is introduced, you might have to trial it out for maybe even 2 to 3 weeks before the child, if you are sure that the child doesn't even look towards it, he doesn't even bother about that particular material, that clearly gives an indication that okay, he's not ready for it or he doesn't want it. But
Yes.
Certain children might, who are quick to try out new things, they might, even within a week you will know whether it works or not. So that the temperament aspect is also something that you need to consider as to how long you can trial something out. So that is something that you'll have to take care of.
We will go to the next question of toileting.
Yeah. Okay, so what age can we start toilet training? uh, I mean, we've in the olden days, where Vidya ma'am's mother, we've had interactions with her. She says that it is possible, and we have a parent here who's also successfully trained her child right from second or third month. She's actually observed the child with regard to their cues and taken care of taking the children right to the a way of disposing the urine or whatever it is.
Yes.
It can start as early as then. It is
Yes.
very much possible.
Very much.
But yeah, I mean, the if we are saying with regard to both urination and defecation, and for the child to completely move and actually go to that particular place by himself completely, I think 8 or 9 months is surely a time that by which you should start, is what we've also been
if you have not done already.
yeah, if you're not done
Important
already.
to start now.
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And how we go about it is a totally different topic.
Yeah,
We'll answer another day. Yeah. And can we speak bilingual with the child? Okay. This again, we need to bring some sort of consistency into it. That is what I would say. uh, we've seen same adults speaking two languages. That also works. Or there is a mother and a father figure at home, and the mother speaking in one particular language to the child continuously, and the father speaking in one particular language to the child continuously. That also helps. That is a way of going about it. But remember this: when the child is very much capable of taking several languages. There is no doubt about it, and he can take it much faster when it is being done at the first few years of life. But the there is an aspect as to the amount of processing time he requires. When there is bilingual, the child has to classify that this is particular this language and this is another language, and putting them in different buckets and actually responding with those sounds with the appropriate person in the appropriate context. All that will take a little bit more time. But once the classification slowly starts, then you will see that the child is much more adept in responding to the various cues.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now
And with regard to single adult, this is something that I've tried out in my classroom, in the 3 to 6 classroom, more than in the 0 to 3. What I've done is, there is a certain time during the day, I prepare my children that I'm going to speak in Tamil only during this particular time, and they go on, and I make the effort to speak proper Tamil during that particular time. And that has also really helped. Children have made a lot of effort to respond in that particular language. So I feel that is also something that is possibly that can be tried out with a very young child. But we need to be really consistent as to which part of the day we are going to which chronological part of the day, probably after the second nap till the third nap begins. That could be a time when we speak another language. So
Okay.
that we need to be clear about. Yeah.
I have one important point there. Bilingual can be primal languages, which the children have heard when they were in the womb. Cannot be English. We are not native speakers. We do not use English at home, usually to talk. And even if we see, having a certain English from an English country, it's different, because the primal language there is English. But for other children here, especially, it is good to have two parents or grandparents speaking native tongues, because that has a lot more clearly defined sounds. It is phonetic, and it is very easy for the children to wire those sounds like this into their mind. And this I have seen with children who have been adopted and taken abroad. When they came back, they could actually connect the sounds, and they could make, in spite of not like completely forgetting the language. So please remember, do not use English at home, because we are, unless one of your, like spouses is a native English English person, please do not use. The native tongue is very crucial for the child's language development and wiring and thinking capabilities. So this is very, very crucial. It's not about even the time. I will say, even if you speak only in one language, stay consistent with it. If it is a native tongue, you have made it. It is brilliant, because when they come to a school environment, they will anyway get immersed into English. They will get anyway immersed into other second and third languages, things like that. It will happen. But multilingual is good, but not English. If there is Tamil, if there is Hindi, if there is, Marathi, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, all that is great, but not English. So this is something that I would like to stress, and see that you are able to, give the child your heads up towards language development.
Okay. So with regard to independence, sleeping and movements, yes. The question is about whether Thuli will affect the way the child puts himself to sleep. Yes, there is a certain amount of dependency on the parent to put the child to sleep, and it is a very difficult habit to break out of also later on.
Absolutely. Exactly.
So this is something that see, the idea is, when the child has enough stimulation from the environment where he is actually started using uh, his faculties of the mind, the body, the moving of his body, if he's done enough work with his self construction, the child will naturally want to go to sleep. That is the uh, crux of it. So if there are opportunities for that, if a child is not going to sleep on his own, that means that probably he's not, his inner urges with regard to building up of his these organs, it is not satisfied to a certain extent, right? So the movement will help in going to sleep, yes, but the point is trying to get him to work on himself, and that will give him the satisfaction of going to sleep peacefully, and that will really help him to form a habit out of it.
Yes.
It takes some time to get out of it also, so that is something that you'll have to work on slowly. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to give an example in this. So I don't know if many of you know that my second child, my son, we adopted him as a 4-month-old baby, 5 months old baby. So till the day he came, he was in the institution, and he was not having any issues related to sleep, because he used to just sleep. But when he came to our home, whatever ignorance, I started rocking him to sleep. Okay. And believe me, it became a nightmare over time, because he refused to sleep. He'll cry till I put him on my lap, and even if he's so sleepy, and I didn't know how to change it, because I had another older child who also wanted to sleep at the same time, and it was quite a traumatic thing. The minute they have to go to sleep, I'll get tensed. Okay, so what I'm saying, slowly it can change. Slowly it can be that you allow the child to tire. Like to become drained out of his day's thing, wind down with the environment that way, and then slowly the child will know that it's a time to sleep, and put him beside. Let him sleep for a while. Not rocking. No movement should be needed at that time. So the child sleeping is just a position and dropping off to sleep. That's all. No rocking movement, or no, tapping, patting. the child may require a blankie. I mean, like my daughter, when she was young, she required a cloth for her to hold herself to sleep. She'll just sleep. That's it. She just needed a cloth, her set of cloths which she had. She used to hold and just go to sleep. So this is something that, we must be conscious of. Okay.
Then, yeah, how to help a child spell a certain sound which he is not able to
Okay,
spell.
1 minute. No, before that, I think it's a request. It is about the daytime nap.
Yeah.
Daytime nap. So even daytime nap is the same. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, with regard to the sounds, see, we need to be careful as to the language that we are speaking. So repeated, consistent, clear and precise language is what will really help the child to come out of, Malalai or the lisping that we talk about here. That certain sounds not being available for the child. So
Yes.
if the child is consistently repeatedly hearing the same sounds again and again and again, that will really help him. So in this respect, the baby talk that we do with regard to the child, that must be avoided.
Yes.
So it is, I mean, if we are especially found that this is a particular difficulty that he's facing, it's okay. You don't have to point that out to the child, but you can repeat, like if the child is saying a word which is, which has a particular slur in it, and you just have to respond to it, that you can ask it like question, are you talking about this particular object? And say that object clearly and precisely and wait for him to respond. And once he's responded, he also gets indirectly the idea that, okay, I've told it differently and I'm hearing it differently. So there is a certain way, probably, if you consistently do that, he will know that, okay, there is some problem in the way I'm doing it. So let me try to change it. And slowly you will see the effort of the child in trying to refine that particular aspect. So in fact, even 3 to 6 is a time for refinement of language as well. So the child can actually work on that by himself also, provided it is not something that the child has to be, made self-conscious about. It can be done naturally without, bringing the child's attention to it. That is my
So
take.
importantly, if it is reinforced, நம்ம வந்து சின்ன வயசுல when we keep reinforcing without our knowledge, we think it's cute, but then we reinforce that sound gets registered as a permanent sound. So it becomes difficult for the child to undo it. So consistently saying when she says it differently, make a gentle attempt to remind her of the sound of, kaathu, ka. So just that way, don't force it. It will slowly change. It will slowly start changing.
You will also see that certain words like tachi mamma is something that even when they're old, they might still say it the same way. That's still all right. But when the other sounds involved, like tayir sadam la irukra other sounds, year and other sounds, if it is using different words other than tachi mamma, that will also help the child to, what I'm trying to say is, when you introduce new words which the child does not know, at least those words, if you are consistent with the pronunciation, the sounds will come. He might still refer to Tayir Sadam as Tachimammu only, but that's still okay. That's fine. But he knows he's still got the sound, right? He's got the sound and he'll use it in other words. So that will be there. So that is something again you will see in children. Like certain words, the ka, the ta might come, but certain words they won't come. That is probably because they've had an experience earlier. So yeah.
Yes. And the other thing is that if there is a tongue putting out lisp, sadam, cool. If that is going to happen, that is a tougher thing to handle. If it is so, it requires a totally a new approach. Please write to me separately, because that requires a certain therapy. My son had it, and I know how it had to be corrected. So because otherwise, if you have elders using like that, so they will do that. But it's not to make fun, but it looks very awkward. It can be corrected at this ages, and it is much possible. So I would recommend that people take note of it, and it is not Madalai, it is a speech difficulty. So the children can be enabled beautifully to transition. So that is not an issue at all. So I think we have overshot our time almost for a half an hour.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's lovely having you all over. I mean, like we've had almost a full attendance till the end, and that's actually something that I feel good about. And what I would recommend that you do, kindly put in your, or if possible, you all know my mail ID or Hari's email ID. Sorry, phone number. Please send your feedback about this session. It's very important for us to consider further sessions. Please send us a note about your feedback on what you felt was good about this session, and what what home messages, take homes was there for you, and what kind of further sessions would you like. So this is an overarching session. So this is, you can write to us about it. We will wait for you to come back to us. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks you once again.
Thank you all, everyone, for listening to me.
But remember to write the feedback, because we need it. I'm again repeating, it is all of you, for us to consider you for our next session. I would request that as a prerequisite, please write a short note on what was importantly relevant for you and what you feel we could do for the next sessions. It should be at least about 10 lines. I hope you will be able to write it and send it to us, because this is something that we have offered and we want this from you in return, nothing else. Thank you so much and have a good day, weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.